A man in a baseball cap slowly drifts through the candy aisle of a convenience store. On video, he appears to be an ordinary customer. He stops, reaches toward a box of candy, lingers for a moment, then walks away. The security camera keeps recording. Only later would investigators return to these few seconds and wonder if they had captured one of the most shocking events in Japan's modern history. The footage became the only known visual fragment tied to one of the country's strangest unsolved crimes, a campaign that terrorized the Japanese citizens, shook public trust, and left police chasing a culprit they could never quite see. For a nation suddenly afraid of what was now on its shelves, the image was almost cruel. A man in the aisle, his face unclear, his name unknown, and one question hanging over every frame. He was the monster with 21 faces. The case began months earlier, on March 18, 1984, inside the home of Katsuhisa Isaki, president of Isaki Glico, one of Japan's best-known confectionery companies. Two masked men first broke into the nearby home of Isaki's mother. After tying her up and taking a key, they moved into the main house. Inside, they bound Isaki's wife and daughter. Then they found Isaki himself in the bath. He was dragged from the home and taken to a warehouse in Ibaraki, a city in Osaka Prefecture. Soon after, the kidnappers demanded 1 billion yen and 100 kilograms of gold bullion. 3 days later, before the ransom was paid, Isaki escaped. According to his testimony, he loosened his bindings and fled the warehouse after being left unmonitored long enough to slip out. The group was organized enough to enter a secured property, cut communications, abduct a corporate president, and demand a fortune. Then, somehow, they lost the one person who could get them paid. Isaki had escaped, but Glico had not. The company itself was still exposed. The next month, company vehicles at Glico's headquarters were burned. Soon after, a container of hydrochloric acid was found inside a company building along with a threatening letter. In it, the writers mocked police, claimed the container was only street garbage, and said they had entered through a side staff entrance. After this, a series of letters arrived at newspapers and police stations. In those letters, the writers insulted investigators, called them fools, and offered details that sounded like clues. They described the color of their car, the store where they had bought food during Isaki's captivity, and even the brand of typewriter used to produce the message. At the bottom of the letters, the writers called themselves the monster with 21 faces. The name came from Edogawa Rampo's detective fiction, where the fiend with 20 faces was a master criminal known for disguises, warnings, and public taunts. Like the criminal in those stories, the monster gave police something to chase, but only in the direction the group had chosen. Later, critics would describe the case as Gekijo Hanzai, a theatrical crime, staged so that the investigation itself became part of the attack. Amid this chaos, the group claimed cyanide-laced Glico candies would appear in shops across Japan. Glico responded by pulling its products nationwide. The recall and lost sales reportedly cost the company more than $20 million. The crisis also led Glico to lay off 450 part-time workers. Despite police searches, no cyanide-laced Glico candy was ever found. In June, the monster abruptly announced that it had forgiven Glico. The group never gave a practical explanation for why the campaign against Glico was ending. However, the fear campaign against food companies was already spreading. One of the next targets was Marudai Ham, a major meat producer. This time, the company prepared to pay the 50 million yen extortion demand, and the police prepared to turn the handoff into a trap. On June 28th, an undercover officer disguised as a Marudai employee boarded a train and followed the monster's instructions. He was supposed to watch for a white flag marking where to throw the ransom money from the train. Police hoped the monster had finally given them a way to reach the group, but the white flag never appeared, and no one came for the money. Instead, the officer noticed someone watching him. He later described the man as large and well-built, wearing sunglasses, with short permed hair and eyes that looked fox-like. He simply stayed close to the officer. At Kyoto, the officer stepped off the train and waited on a bench. The suspect remained nearby, watching him. When the officer boarded a train back toward Osaka, the man followed in a different car. At Takatsuki, the officer got off again. The man did too. Then the suspect changed direction and boarded a train back toward Kyoto. This time, another undercover investigator picked up the tale. But somewhere between the trains, platforms, and station crowds, the man slipped away. The man would later be called the Fox-Eyed Man, one of the case's key unidentified figures. Police saw in him the monster's pattern, watching from close range, but never quite stepping into reach. The money was ready, and again, the monster stayed just outside the moment of collect. By October, the monster sent a letter addressed to mothers across Japan. The new target was Morinaga, another major confectionery company. The message claimed that some of Morinaga's sweets had been given a special bitter flavor, cyanide. After the Glico incident, Morinaga initially treated the warning as another bluff. However, police searches from Tokyo to Western Japan found cyanide-laced Morinaga products on store shelves. Oddly enough, the suspected packages carried warning labels such as, quote, "Danger, contains toxins." The labels may have prevented customers from eating the sweets, but they also made the motive harder to understand. A group seeking mass harm would not normally warn its victims. A group seeking simple extortion would not normally turn every threat into a public spectacle. Whatever the reason, the warning spread exactly the kind of fear the monster had created around Glico. Morinaga products were pulled from shelves, and the company was forced to cut production by 90%. At the same time, parents nationwide hesitated before buying sweets, while tens of thousands of police officers monitored grocery stores and convenience stores, waiting for the monster to make a mistake. Then came the image the police had been waiting for. A security camera inside a store captured the baseball cap man touching candy in an aisle. The footage gave police a figure, but not a face they could use. The camera angle was poor, the image was grainy, and the tape had reportedly been overwritten so many times over the course of a year that the picture had degraded. When police released the footage, the man became one of the case's most recognizable figures, even if no one ever could identify him. The case dragged on into 1985. Threats moved from company to company, and the letters kept arriving. Police investigated possible suspects, including Manabu Miyazaki, a man with alleged underworld ties who resembled the Fox-Eyed Man. His father was linked to organized crime, and Miyazaki himself had once supported a local union during a labor dispute involving Glico. But his alibis stood up to scrutiny, and no hard evidence tied him to the crimes. The investigation kept widening. Japan's police had entered the decade with an extraordinary clearance record. In 1983, they cleared more than 97% of homicide cases, but this investigation kept spreading beyond them. Investigators pursued more than 28,000 tips. They examined nearly 125,000 people. Over time, the investigation reportedly involved more than 1 million police deployments in some capacity. Still, there was no arrest. In August 1985, Shiga Prefecture Police Superintendent Shoji Yamamoto took his own life through self-immolation after the failure to capture the suspects. 5 days later, the monster wrote again. The letter mocked Yamamoto and dismissed his final act as foolish. And still, the letter said Yamamoto had, quote, died like a man. Because of that, the writers claimed they would stop harassing food-making companies. Any new blackmail letters, they said, would come from copycats. This time, they signed off with, quote, "It's fun to lead a bad man's life." After this, the monster disappeared. There was no confession, no courtroom, and no revealed motive. For Japan's police, the failure had unfolded in full public view. The mystery was not only the monster's identity, but also its motive. The group kept demanding money, setting up handoffs, and then staying away when the exchange was supposed to happen. From that pattern came one of the most disturbing theories in the case. One theory suggests the profit may not have been in the ransom drops at all. It may have been in the stock market. If someone sold shares in the targeted food companies before the threats became public, panic could push the prices down. Then, if that same person bought the shares back at the lower price, the campaign could have turned fear into money. The market damage was real. Japan's Ministry of Agriculture reported a 10% decline in sweets consumption nationwide. Morinaga's sales may have fallen by as much as 60%. Still, economic damage is not proof of market manipulation. The statute of limitations expired for the kidnapping by the mid-1990s and for the attempted poisonings by 2000. Even then, no one came forward. All that remains is the footage of a man in a cap, standing in a candy aisle, touching a box of sweets. The man in the frame may not have been the monster. He might not have been connected to the group at all. Or he may have been the only part of the monster that Japan was allowed to see.